Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be going over the basics of Python. For most of the projects that you do, you are going to be using all of these concepts that I'm going to be teaching you. The first concept, which is the easiest to understand, is that there is a console. This is where all the stuff gets printed, all the information that the user can see. The code right here, the user will not be able to see. Whatever gets outputted here is what the user wants to see. Okay, so let's use a print statement, right? And as you can see, I already have print statements here. These are dividers for each of the sections. Let's try printing out hello world. Let's run that. Hello world. You can print out a lot of things. You can print out numbers. Let's print out the number 7. Pretty cool. This is your main way of communicating to the user what you want to print out, what you want to show, right? But let's say you want to use like a certain message, like hello world, multiple times throughout your code. The easiest way to do this is to make it into something called a variable. And variables are going to be very, very important in everything that you do. If you've taken like a pre-algebra level course, you might know what variables are in math, right? But they're actually very simple. So let's have a variable called a message, and let's store the value of hello world inside of it. Okay, and remember, whenever you're storing a message like this, it should be in quotation marks, and I'll tell you why later on. Now let's try to print out this message. Now here's the thing, message won't be printed out. What will actually be printed out is hello world. Let's look at it. Hello world. Now the reason for this is because the value of message is hello world. If you made this into quotation marks, we get a completely different response, right? So make sure that if you just want to print out message, you use quotation marks. But if you want to use a variable, don't use quotation marks in your print statement. Okay, now what exactly are these quotation marks for? Well, it's a certain variable type called a string. So there's two types of variables. There's strings, which are words. They can be sentences, they can be paragraphs. But usually they're just like, at most, a sentence. And then there's something called integers. And if you've taken a pre-algebra level course, you know what they are, but they're basically whole numbers. Cool. Now, let's have a variable called x, and let's store a variable of 7 in it. Now, is this an integer or a string? If you said it's an integer, you're correct. 7.4, on the other hand, is not an integer nor a string. It's something called a float, which you'll learn later, because it's not a whole number. Now, the reason why a string is in quotation marks, and let's write another message. Hello, my name is, right? The reason why this is in quotation marks is because if we didn't have it in quotation marks, the program would assume that it has something to do with the code, right? Like message is a variable, it has something to do with the code. This is just a value. It's a string, right? It's a value. It's not, it doesn't change the code whatsoever. Okay? So if you have any questions related to integers or strings, you can look at the source code or you can ask us on our Discord. Let's move on to math operators, okay? Now the 4 basic operators, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, are as follows. Plus for addition, minus for subtraction. You want to press the shift and the 8 key, which is an asterisk, for the multiplication symbol, and then you want to do the slash symbol at the bottom left of your keyboard for divide. Once you get used to this, it's pretty simple, and if you already used computers before, you'll probably already know how to do this. So let's try it out. Okay, let's have a few variables. X equals 8, y equals 4, z equals 36. Okay, let's try some simple operations. X plus y. What do you think will print out? 12. Nice. Let's try subtraction. What do you think will print out? 4. Okay. And you can get the gist of it. Is 8 times 4 is 32. And division 36 divided by 4 is 9. Division multiplication. Pretty nice, right? Let's get into a bit more complex operations. Let's try x plus z minus y. X, let's do x times. So, you might be wondering why there's a parenthesis there. The reason why there is a parenthesis is because this follows the order of operations, PEMDAS, if you remember. First comes the parentheses, then the exponents, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. So, as you can see, x is equal to 8, right? Z minus y is 36 minus 4, which is 32. 32 times 8, and you don't have to do the math, but you get it, right? It'll be something like around 256. Yeah, 256. So, make sure that you follow the order of operations when you're doing coding, as well as when you're doing math. This is a good example of why programming can be very helpful for math, because you're going to be doing a decent amount of math, and it's easy. It's not hard math. But if you don't like math, you can go over to HTML or CSS. There's literally no math involved there. Okay, now here's a little bit more of a complex subject. The exponents, which is double star, and the modulo symbol, percent. And let me write it, modulo, like this. Okay, so, and then actually let me also do this, because you might not know what this is at first glance. The ones up here are kind of obvious and self-explanatory, but let's go over what this is. Let's have new variables. A equals 3, B equals 2. What happens when I do A to the power of B? And if you haven't gone to exponents yet, I don't think you have to worry about this, but it's good to know. Basically, 3 to the power of 2 is 3 times 3. 3 to the power of 3 would be 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, so this would print out 9. Now let's try b to the power of a. What do you think will print out? 8. Okay, now this is where things might get confusing, but it's really simple, and it's actually very helpful later on. So this is the modulo symbol right here. Okay, what it does is it just finds the remainder of a divided by b. You can imagine this as a divided by b, and wherever the remainder is what's printed out. Okay, so 3 divided by 2 would give you 1, right? But that's not what's gonna, well, it is, I guess, because the remainder of 3 divided by 2 is 1. So what will print out here is 1. Let's try something bigger. 8 divided by, okay? 8 divided by 3 would give you 2 remainder 2. Okay, that's another bad example. Let's try 11. That's a good example. 11 divided by 3 would give you 3 remainder 2. So it looks something like this. You know this notation. 3 remainder 2. 3 won't be printed out. In fact, 2 will be printed out. And let's see if that's true or not. Yes. So yeah, this is just the simple basics. If you need any help, remember you can contact us on our Discord, or you can look at the source code that I'm going to be linking at the bottom of the page.